Dear participants, welcome to the inaugural session, the inaugural encounter of a series of encounters on challenges of the IP system in a post-crisis world. We have 900 registered participants from more than 60 countries all over the planet, and we are here to reflect together on how we would shape a better world, but also how we would shape a better world thanks to intellectual property, by revisiting intellectual property. And today's inaugural encounter is precisely dedicated to permitting to shape the role of IP in the post-crisis environment. I am Laurent Manderieux, the coordinator of the Transatlantic Intellectual Property Academy and the Academic Encounters Director for this series of conferences. I would wish to warmly thank Fide, the Spanish foundation that has partnered with us in organizing this event, and the very numerous sponsors who have supported us in being so numerous today. I would also wish to warmly thank our excellent, extraordinary speakers, Kamperman-Sanders from Maastricht University, also Jane Ginsburg from Columbia University, and our very, very special and exceptional moderator, Manuel de Santos Real from the University of Alicante and Fide as well. In this objective that we shall meet, starting as of today, and in a series then of detailed encounters in the coming weeks and months for a year, our objective is really to promote questions that we, the IP family, may have on how we can be useful for, of course, better well-doing of society after the crisis, for a well-doing that is in the economic side, but also, and we should not forget it, on the social side. So we'll work on it as an IP family, thanks to your questions and thanks to your feedbacks, thanks to your questions and feedbacks, including during this very presentation today. We are honored of your presence, and I wouldn't wish to, let's say, lower your expectations by keeping the floor now for too long. I would want to give the floor to our friend, Javier Fernández-Lasquetty from Fide, who partnered with us today for this exceptional event or series of events on which we are so happy to see you numerous. Thank you. Fernández, the floor is yours. Javier Fernández, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurent, and thank you to you all. Well, very, very short. As a member of the Academic Council of Fide, I would like to welcome you here today and give my warmest thanks to the speakers, to the professors that are here. Well, in a forest of webinars, what we are crossing today, we're trying to offer something that we call global digital encounters that would like to be something different, a different tree that I think has profound roots in the soil of knowledge, and that profound roots are the professors that have kindly accepted to join us and to participate in these events that as the one that we have prepared for today, and the following that will continue in the next weeks and months. We hope you enjoy all of them. At the end, maybe we will give some ideas of what will be the following sessions, etc. And I will give take more time in presentations, because I think that you are here to speak, the professors, to which I kindly kindness I thank very much, and well, I hope you all enjoy. So, Laurent, the floor is yours again. Thank you.
Thank you, Javier, for your kind words. We are so happy of this partnership and of the friendship network that we are creating all around the world for a better world, and also for a better IP world, or a better world thanks to the support of current or changed IP. I would pass on the floor right away to our splendid moderator, Professor Manuel de Santos Real, who will introduce the speakers. Being also one of the speakers, I go back to my role of panelist at this very stage. Manuel, the floor is yours.
So it's time to work. My dears, I guess that we are all aware that things are not going to be anymore like they used to be. Suddenly, we are conscious of our physical limitations. I had the impression until 3 months ago that humans had arrived to a stage where technology was going to make us superhumans. You know? We're going to live forever, healthy, vigorous, always with the best shape. You know? But it is not like that. The arrival of just a small thing called COVID-19 has made all of us just recluded at home. Thousands of millions of people have changed radically their lives. We had increased dramatically our perception of risk. And we look at more and more uncertainties all over. The world used to be flat, but now it looks like the world is less flat. Suddenly, in a couple of months, new sectors have emerged and they look more relevant than others. Our behavior as a customers, as a client, as a professional, have also changed dramatically. We have understood that we have a complete dependency on technology. I mean, just organizing this event has been quite a nightmare. I'm just confessing openly things which have come to my mind during the last 2 months. Yeah. It looks like a black swan has shown up unexpectedly. And I have to confess you that I'm quite lost. So all in all, it is fair to ask openly whether all this should have an impact on the design of the intellectual property system. And I believe it does. And I have also the perception that human expertise suddenly become more and more relevant. In an environment where we have more and more uncertainties, human expertise becomes again relevant. And that's why the global digital encounters have been designed. So the purpose of today is not to answer questions. The purpose of today is rather raising more questions and more uncertainties. That's why we have thought of bringing to you 3 of the most renowned specialists all over the world. That's why we're going to collect all your questions, regardless whether we can answer them or not. We will only be able to answer some, but we're going to collect all of them. We're going to publish them. No single question will be lost. So thanks a lot to Anselm, thanks to Jane, thanks to Laurent for being guinea pigs in this exercise. Yeah. And a very good morning, very good afternoon, very good evening, and very good night to everybody. You cannot imagine until what extent is a huge pleasure welcoming you all. Almost 900 people registered, coming from more than 60 countries, from Sydney to San Francisco. This is amazing. It could be foolish to introduce the speakers. You know very well all of them. I will give them the floor in this order. First, Professor Kamperman-Sanders, then Professor Ginsburg, and then Professor Manderieux. So Anselm, before giving you the floor, please let me know that I know Anselm Kamperman-Sanders is more than 15 years. During the last 15 years, we have worked side by side, and it is a great honor, Anselm, having you today with us as the first speaker of the first Global Digital Encounter. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Manuel. and a warm welcome to all participants in these difficult times. Difficult times to discuss intellectual property in a post-crisis environment. But before getting there, I thought I would share with you some images of human ingenuity during the COVID pandemic that is now having a huge impact on our lives. So if I turn to those images and I go to the next slide, please. I'm first of all taken by the enormous efforts that health professionals are undertaking in order to fight the pandemic. And it is very interesting in this regard that the people in the Southampton hospital who found this painting hanging as holding them out as the heroes of this time were duly impressed by the fact that the reputation of the artist in question, this artist took the time in order to make this painting for them. And I guess for also the post-crisis world, the question of reputational value of artists will remain with us. Despite all the artificial intelligence that is coming our way, my feeling is that we will be touched by artists presenting their art and reminding us that we are all human. It is then also this issue of technology. Technology is important, but don't forget the arts. And what about the role of intellectual property? Is it going to help us, or is it a hindrance? In the race for a vaccine, in the race to find drugs to treat this disease? Or is it going to be America first versus global solidarity? This is the fault line that we are starting to see. Next slide, please. In this light, it's perhaps good to remind us that there are also frivolous issues, games that we can play. A new game has entered the market, the pandemic, how to become a quarantine specialist. And this may occupy our time. And you see the creativity already sort of bubbling up in this time of crisis. Next slide. This is also true for the predictions. The predictions were there, and especially in relation to artificial intelligence and big data, predictive analysis of diseases will be possible and was already possible if only leaders had listened earlier. Next slide, please. And this is what we now see, technology being applied. But the question increasingly becomes whether this technology, facial recognition and apps, are going to help us out of the pandemic, or whether there are concerns in relation to our liberties. Next slide, please. Other technologies are there to assist us, and certainly wearables like this one, artificial intelligence once more, Internet of Things and artificial intelligence of things devices will become much more prominent, and questions will arise in terms of the way in which these devices will need to be governed. Next slide, please. Robotics will become more and more important, certainly in days of social distancing. And certainly we will hear more from the next speakers about that, what this may imply also for intellectual property. And then next slide, please. For my own contribution on patents, we already have seen great human ingenuity in order to deal with air ventilation or filtration, looking at devices that are around that in combination can assist us, where through 3D printing of component parts, it is all of a sudden possible to give new purposes to existing devices. And this is where I would like to continue. Increasingly, we see public-private partnerships come to the fore in order to deal with this pandemic. And where public-private partnerships are of importance, the question can also then be, to what extent is it justified that private parties block developments like this, or indeed walk away with the intellectual property that is created with the use of taxpayers' money? And this is the end of the presentation, and perhaps I can now resume with my image. That would be pleasant. Thank you. And so here I would like to raise a number of questions with you. And this is also where we would like to hear more from you. Do we feel that where the purpose of the patent system has been to create a competitive market for technology, not merely a reward for investment, that property should be relative, especially in relation to health crises like we are facing now, where public-private partnerships are crucial to find solutions? Doesn't this put into different light the issue of compulsory licensing and private formulations, where patents are clearly there to serve the public good? Doesn't that also raise issues in terms of enforcement? And then finally, I already indicated open source possibilities like the 3D printing, where increasingly, and especially now that we find ourselves at home, 3D printing may be a way forward in order to ensure that the public at large has access to new devices and new findings. But of course, 3D printing in the privacy of one's own home is not subject to any patent right. So what about the open source sharing of computer-aided design files? This may also have an impact on design law in future. And to conclude, in this same narrative, I already see that in the field of investor-state dispute settlement, there is a great debate going on as to whether arbitration cases against states over healthcare and pharma-related measures should be halted at this point in time. Also, because many of the countries taking those measures are hard hit by the crisis, and it may be totally unjustified in this light to allow investors to sue states that see sort of their very fabric, their economic safeguards sort of melt away in these times of crisis. If that is true for controversial areas like investor-state dispute settlement, is it then also the case that in relation to intellectual property rights and their enforcement, there should be sort of a reassessment of the almost sacrosanct nature of property that intellectual property right holders believe it to be. And perhaps this also means that where royalty income flow of intellectual property rights has gone into tax havens, we will see a discussion on taxation of royalties, and also then related thereto the question whether companies that have engaged in tax evasion in this way deserve to be saved with taxpayers' money in this time of crisis. This all sounds very negative, but I think questions have to be asked. And this also is then the flip side of the very positive impact of human ingenuity that I've shown you before in the slides, where you feel that intellectual property is important for the dissemination and the protection of the creative mind and efforts. Thank you very much.
So thanks a lot, Anselm. It was splendid with an amount of issues thrown on the table in only 10 minutes. We do appreciate. And now I would like to say hello to New York. And to welcome Jane Ginsburg. Professor Ginsburg welcomed me more than 25 years ago in New York. Since then, we have been working together and seeing each other in many places all over the world. And since then, also, my understanding that she is one of the most respectful witness of the academia in copyright has come to my complete understanding. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to Jane and give her 10 minutes to approach the matter now from the copyright perspective. Jane, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Manuel. It is a pleasure to participate in this webinar. Welcome to all across time zones and countries. And I would like to pick up where Anselm left off. We were instructed to be provocative, and I think Anselm has certainly risen to that challenge. I will attempt to do that as well, starting with my visual aid. As you can see, I do not have PowerPoint slides. I have a whiteboard, and the whiteboard represents first a preferred teaching method as we go to remote learning, but also something of the persistence of the old world in the new. I believe that many of the things...
Jane, sorry to interrupt you a moment. I'm not so sure whether we can see the whole screen. Could you perhaps move it a little bit more on your right, and then we can see what you are showing us?
Well, okay, I can't see what you see. I have two screens on my computer, one which shows the entire whiteboard, and one which only shows approximately up to here. So yeah. What can the participants view? Because the larger screen that I have is not a complete screen. My little screen is a complete screen, but I can't tell which screen the audience can see.
Yeah. Well, then I think it is wiser to continue. Yeah. Thank you, and sorry for interrupting.
I'm going to assume that people can see the larger screen. Otherwise, my resort to old technology is completely fruitless, which may itself be some kind of a metaphor. To return to the overall presentation, we were asked to think about intellectual property in the changed world, the post-pandemic world. And in order to consider the challenges for intellectual property and what might or should change in intellectual property regimes, and specifically for me, copyright, that I think it is necessary to consider what is likely to change, and then see what those implications are. So I have divided the areas of change into three big categories, of which the first is the one with the greatest implications for copyright, but I thought I would evoke all of them. In many respects, these are changes that were happening already before the virus, but the advent of the virus has given a lot of impetus to the further development of these phenomena. So one phenomenon is remote. That is, so many things are going to be done remotely. We are, and many people will continue to be working remotely. We will be learning remotely. This is not new. For example, in Spain, the Universitat Oberta de Catalunya has been an online university for over 20 years, and perhaps the rest of us have a lot to learn from the WOC. So this is not new, but it is very much amplified. Entertainment and museums, if we cannot gather together in large numbers, this will continue to migrate online. And then the production of consumer goods at home through 3D printing. I will return to these because all of these have a lot of copyright implications. The second category of how the world will change will be the vast increase in automation. We will see more and more robot workers. We will see self-driving transport. All of this is going to put a lot of people out of work and will need to redirect them to other sorts of jobs. But this is a phenomenon which I think we have seen coming, but now it has more urgent impetus. And then finally, I will evoke, but not discuss, the cashless society. To an increasing extent, people use credit cards and debit cards, and for those who are worried about the transmission of germs, you don't want to touch cash, you don't want to touch money, and therefore I think that the progression towards a cashless society will simply increase. Now, what all of these things have in common that is relevant to copyright is that they are all heavily dependent on software, also on internet connectivity, on databases, artificial intelligence, which Laurent will talk more about. And especially when we talk about software, we are talking about subject matter which is protected internationally by copyright and can be the subject of, therefore, proprietary rights, which brings us to Anselm's question, which is that the way things should be? Should software, which is so essential to all of this, be proprietary? I'm not going to make a normative claim here, but what I would like to observe is that paradoxically, although we think about copyright as a form of exclusive private rights, copyright can also serve to make works more available rather than less available. And I'm thinking specifically of the free and open source movement. And it depends on copyright because the licenses that require people, for example, to share alike, if you use code from the commons, then if you improve it or add to it, you have to put it back and allow others to build on it as you built on the work of your predecessors. And if you don't do that, if you take and don't give back, you're a copyright infringer with the copyright remedies available to you. So copyright actually underpins this public availability of work. And I suspect that we will be seeing a lot more of that in the post-crisis world. A few other observations returning to the category of remote, how much more we will be doing remotely. Of course, there's the software that underpins all of this. When it comes to remote learning, there are a number of issues that I think are not universally resolved regarding the transposition of education exceptions that have developed for the in-person teaching environment that need to be extended to the remote digital environment. In my own country, in the United States, we have a very awkward and over-specific law on distance learning and educational exceptions that probably needs to be overhauled because it did not contemplate what we're doing now. Entertainment and museums. I think Anselm made an interesting point about the value of artistic reputation, and I entirely concur with that. And one of my concerns that has arisen well before the pandemic is the extent to which authors, artists, performers will receive recognition for their work. All too often, they're not making money, even pre-pandemic. The pandemic may have unleashed a great deal of creativity. Nobody at the moment seems to be too preoccupied with getting paid for it. In the future, especially if people don't have other jobs, they might be more interested in getting paid for their creativity. And at the very least, they want recognition for their creativity. Authors in many countries, unfortunately not mine, do have a moral right of attribution of authorship. But even where the legal structure recognizes those rights, the code structure often doesn't. All too often, when works are placed on platforms, the identifying information is stripped out. So I think we need to develop more robust ways of ensuring that authors, performers continue to receive recognition for their works. The last category I'd like to say a couple of words about is 3D printing. As the prospect of retail stores disappearing, which is already happening in the United States, as that increases, there may be more of a move to do it yourself. That is to print out your consumer goods at home. And 3D printing poses a host of issues, some of which Anselm referred to with respect to the CAD files. It also proposes a number of interesting issues about if any of the chain of processes that leads to printing out a consumer good at home implicates copyright, design law, patent law. Who is liable? If we do not hold the consumer liable, who up the chain should bear the burden of clearing rights, if there are rights to be cleared in the various subject matter implicated in 3D printing? So with those questions, I will turn it over to Laurent. I had posited that one reason that we might see more do-it-yourself is that there will no longer be the workers to take the goods from the warehouses and put them in trucks and have trucks driven to your home. However, that premise ignores the possibility that we will have robots who will take the goods off the shelves, and self-driving trucks. And so all of this supply chain can be maintained, just not by, at least not directly, by human beings. So with that provocation, I turn it over to Laurent.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks very much for all these sort of questions on the table. It's such a pleasure to see you again. When we see you, Jane, we don't have the perception that we are approaching an American. You are European. And it should be great if we could find much more academics in the United States having the global approach you have offered to us, and especially the understanding of Europe that you show every time. Thank you, Jane. And now it's the time to give the floor to the director of the encounters, one of my best friends, Laurent Manderieux, with whom since more than 15 years ago we share adventures as beautiful as TIPSA. And Laurent will give us the approach of how artificial intelligence enters into this new world and how it affects the intellectual property system. So, Laurent, you have the floor also for 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Manolo, and thanks above all to Jane and Anselm, since you have considerably facilitated my work. Since you already paved the way to describing us how artificial intelligence is crucial to our society in this very moment. Distant working was made possible thanks to machines and networks, to computer power, to computer software, and to networks. Distance living was meant for many of us meeting the family through computers. That means, again, through computers and networks. Distant treating the patient in order to avoid the infection is often made by robots. Distant caring of those we love is often made thanks precisely to machines. So artificial intelligence, which was already in our life, with the current crisis, takes the first stage, the front stage of the scene. And as such, artificial intelligence, back to our IP issues, as mentioned by Jane and Anselm, of course, creates in an upside-down world an AI-led revolution of intellectual property. We cannot escape anymore this revolution. This revolution had started in 2001 when we saw blossoming the number of publications in the field of intellectual property and in the field of artificial intelligence connected, and also in the field of scientific research. As of 2013, we see the blossoming of patenting. There are currently 340,000 patent families that are connected with artificial intelligence issues. So this is absolutely remarkable. So AI, whether we want it, whether we like it or not, enters into the traditional IP system we know and will profoundly shape it in a different format. Well, first of all, we should understand that there is no definition of artificial intelligence as such. There are many. It may be a super intelligence, which is above and beyond the human being. It may be a general intelligence under which we consider that artificial intelligence thinks like humans, act like humans, but it thinks and acts in our fields rationally. Okay. We can simply consider artificial intelligence as intelligent agents performing several tasks. And when we talk very generally of artificial intelligence, we should remember that we are either considering the general or super intelligence or the intelligent agents. This is not exactly the same issue. The general intelligence and the superintelligence try to compare with the human being. The intelligent agents, the programmed intelligence, don't go beyond. So there are two families in artificial intelligence that we can consider. So going quickly also to the consequences I can see at this very stage to launch the debate and not to occupy too long the stage, is that artificial intelligence basically brings two issues. The issue of how this intelligence, this form of intelligence, creates outputs. So outputs in this very case, the concept of inventor, the concept of authorship is of originality, of non-obviousness and obviousness in IP law is deeply changed. Currently, IP specialists, but also IP offices are struggling with these questions. As such, artificial intelligence also can be considered for input issues. Can artificial intelligence become an inventor or an author? We know the reluctance in the US. We know the recent decision of the EPO in refusing granting patents for artificial intelligence since they are not human beings, so it's not possible technically. We know as well that in the very recent time, a Chinese court, the court of Shenzhen, granted, or at the end did not grant rights, but considered that artificial intelligence can create a work that could be subject to copyright. So this is, of course, for us, a major challenge. These challenges, on which we will come in detail, possibly in other encounters as well, and during the Q&A today, if we have time, these challenges are met daily by the intellectual property offices of all over the world. When they register intellectual property rights, they need to back themselves more and more on tools, on search tools that are based also on artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence as a mean to process applications. And this is something very important, especially for those who are directly involved in the IP business. So in this very case, we face a certain number of problems of what is the average evaluation that artificial intelligence does in this respect. So we face a series of new issues, on the substance of IP rights that need to be revisited, and on the technicality of the operations for obtaining rights. And even a further issue, should rights not be revisited? The international conventions are silent on artificial intelligence. Paris, Bern, TRIPS, okay, they cover, for TRIPS, they cover software, fine. For some national laws, for the European Patent Convention, they cover also protection of inventions, and they cover also computer implemented inventions, but this is not, these directions may need to be specified. So some exclusions in the field of appropriation. This issue of exclusion was raised earlier by Anselm and was raised in the sense of openness by Jane. And these are questions we need to further discuss, of course, between academics, but because of their practical implications, we should also consider how policymakers could establish frameworks that permit intellectual property to achieve its economic and its social goals. The European Parliament has recently issued through EP, so European Parliament RS, a summary on the role of artificial intelligence in the context of the current pandemia. This summary may bring basis for reflecting in many fields, including the field of intellectual property, on how we should go further in our common research of legal solutions, but also very effective solutions for all of us in this very field. This is an introductory debate. My duty is to limit myself to a very small initial presentation. I would just wish to remind a few figures. The world of artificial intelligence protection has moved from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The countries that get most, or the applicants that get most patents for artificial intelligence inventions, come from an area comprised between Eastern Asia and the East Coast of America. So China, the Republic of Korea, Japan, USA, Canada, and of course the most high-tech European countries may count, though marginally, in this game, as well as Israel. So as such, basically, very few countries are in the club. And this club is a club of the Pacific, basically, something Europeans, since I work and teach at Bocconi University in the heart of Europe, something that Europeans should worry, and something that we should also consider for a harmonious development of inventions in this respect and protection of inventions. So this is the issue with patents. Open models offer fantastic opportunities. I wouldn't wish to go further in my assigned time. I would really wish that we, in these successive encounters, keep this horizontal topic present throughout. How artificial intelligence will actually be the leading engine of the revisiting of intellectual property. Thank you. So now, moderator.
Thank you very much. Thanks. No, I'm here. Laurent, don't worry. It takes some seconds, but just let me thank you, Laurent. In just 10 minutes, you have brought so many questions and such a complex issue. Thanks very much. I have the perception when I listen you and when I read the questions, there are more than 50 questions already on the table. That we are opening quite a very challenging Pandora box, where probably those who are listening are more important, if I may, than those who are bringing us the speakers today. And this is a very challenging exercise. What I propose is now to go to some of the questions. We have a schedule 1 hour. We could go 5-10 minutes more, but not more in principle. You have to tell us in whatever way whether you feel comfortable with 1 hour or you think that 1 hour and a half could be more digestible, having then the possibility of having more questions. And all the questions will be published, and of course there will be a way for everybody to comment on the questions and to bring other questions on board. And with all this will be an immense food for thought for everybody, but also it will be for us a terrific tool to organize the next encounters in the future. So I have a lot of questions, but let's just start with one, and is a general one, I guess that a little bit more for Jane, perhaps. During the pandemic, a lot of creators are giving their works for free. How this strategy affects the social perception of the cost value of IP culture in general? Again, a challenging question.
Yes. I think the predicate question is, what is that value already, given that there has been such a tremendous amount of sharing, not all of it voluntary on the part of creators, of their work? Has technology, in a sense, devalued the economic prospects for creators who are expected to be creative thanks to their burning inspiration without a a concomitant desire for compensation. I think that question, which has already come to the fore for the last 20 years or so, may be even more acute these days. I would think it is a great shame for the work of creative people to be valued morally and devalued economically. And I think that it's not entirely clear how this is going to shake out, whether creators are expected to donate the fruits of their inspiration for the greater good, or whether there will be an effective, not burdensome way of ensuring that that creators get paid for their work as well.
Thank you very much, Jane. Another question, I guess, for Anselm. Can compulsory licensing be claimed or enforced by a global organization? If so, which one?
Well, I already answered that question online. To me, that would be interesting.
Sorry, Anselm, I could not read everything at the same time and listen.
No, but I'm very happy to restate my reply to that,
so you are
because I'm also happily typing away. But
okay.
My answer to this was I would love to see more of a coordinated effort, especially in relation to sort of a compulsory licensing at EU level. It seems that member states are sort of going their own way in this regard, which seems totally unnecessary to me. And also, for all the talk about compulsory licensing, there is a big caveat. And that is especially in the field of new pharmaceuticals that are more biologically based. It is simply impossible to find an alternative producer. In many instances, there will not be another manufacturer capable of reproducing one of the new drugs that is talked about, or that is needed. And so we end up with sort of a compulsory licensing discussion which is nice on paper, but doesn't really yield any meaningful results. Ultimately, and this is what you see if you compare sort of EU member states, it is simply this: larger member states with larger populations are simply capable of negotiating a much better deal on price than smaller member states. And to me, it simply points to the need for collective bargaining in terms of healthcare, rather than sort of allowing countries to be played off against each other in the negotiation with pharmaceutical companies. And on the other hand, one also has to, of course, take note of the fact that many of the pharma companies are huge contributors to our sort of healthy state of being, especially in the West. And to that extent, I'm also a believer that we in the West should pay a higher price for pharmaceutical products as compared to those people living in countries less well off. They are also simply entitled to a healthy life and to the pharmaceutical products that they need. Whether that pans out sort of in equal and fair distribution is too much to go into right now. You could dedicate an entire session to this. But I think sort of compulsory licensing is not a panacea for the distribution, equitable distribution and access to pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Ansel. There is another question for Laurent. Do you think that the crisis will speed up the adoption of artificial intelligence and robotics in industry?
Dear participants, I indeed think that for sure the current crisis and the post-crisis will accelerate this. Enormous investments were made in all fields, well, in many fields of technologies, in robotics, but also in medicines, in order to find solutions. And there will be an acceleration of this. There is no single doubt on this. The issue that I connect to this, and also perhaps to our next activity that we will organize later in May, relates to international trade and also to developing countries. So if artificial intelligence invades the industry, that means makes so many operations mechanical and with less human intervention, the least developed countries and the developing countries that are big providers of products for us would survive under which formats if they don't have access to the same technologies. So this is an issue that connects the relation between artificial intelligence and workforce. Artificial intelligence creates new jobs, but also make a swift an evolution from unqualified jobs to qualified jobs. And this, let's say the divide, the north-south divide, risks to be further incremented due to artificial intelligence. So yes, for the industry, but with a redistribution of the world trade, possibly, and with scenarios for developing countries not engaged towards an economy of innovation, but exclusively engaged in imitation and in making low-end products for markets more difficult. So
Thank you very much, Laurent.
Not a globalized world, but a further divided world, perhaps. Let's hope not.
Thank you, Laurent. 1 hour is arriving, and unfortunately, we have to close little by little. And I would like to do it with a question coming from a very dear friend, which is addressed to you three. Mm-hmm. And I guess you could try to answer each of you just 1 minute, if it's possible, each of you, yeah, with the serving, let's say, as a conclusion. The question is the following. How can we redesign the IP system to fit with the new economic and social models likely to emerge? How can we redesign the IP system to fit the new economic and social models likely to emerge? 1 minute, that's a challenge. Ansel, you start.
Well, I think the enduring value of intellectual property is that it is creating competitive markets, and it enables technology transfer. It is a conduit that allows for the transfer of technology from labs to market, and in the context of what is to come in the fourth industrial revolution, I think that importance will become even stronger, because the interdependence between various fields of research and development will only increase. What we will see is that with artificial intelligence, with 3D printing, with internet and artificial intelligence of things, with the rise of the data economy, intellectual property will less likely result in sort of monopolies covering entire fields. What that does mean, however, is that we will see the emergence, and that is what we already see, especially now, of new monopolists. So Amazon has done great business, and it's not just sort of bringing physical products into your home. It's also the entire analytics of your purchasing behavior and the way in which you pay, at what time of the day you shop, etc., etc. That is part of their entire value chain. These are the types of corporations that in a post-crisis environment benefit immensely from all the integrated ICT systems. And so this is where part of the challenge is going to lie. On the other hand, it is possible for many more players to sort of tap into this new ecosystem that this sort of new platform technologies allow us to come up with all kinds of new products and services that were hitherto unavailable. And in that context, IP is going to be incredibly important to be able to connect to a platform or to have access to a platform and so on and so forth. So to a certain extent, intellectual property will be even more important than it was before. On the other hand, it is going to my mind, raise a discussion on what are standard essential patents, what are new monopolists in the market, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, or in the Chinese reality, this is Baidu, Tencent, Huawei, and so on. And so these are the new tech firms in the future that will allow us to have different types of jobs that were spoken about, but is also going to raise issues of inequality in other ways, and that is something that we have to be prepared for. And I can just point to the World Economic and Social Survey that the UN issued in 2018 on frontier technologies that very, very nicely lays out sort of these issues that we will be confronted with in the near future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Anselm. So Jane, you have the floor.
I'm sorry, Jane, your microphone is off. If you could please turn it on and begin again. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Anselm's observations point to a critical feature which is actually outside or alongside the intellectual property laws, and that is the competition or antitrust laws. That the role of antitrust or competition law in constraining the overdevelopment of intellectual property monopolies is going to be ever more significant. And I think even in the United States, we have begun to recognize that there has been a problem that has grown out of the extraordinary development of some of the platforms which have been able to gobble up their competitors without restraint. Within the intellectual property system, or more specifically the copyright system, is it necessary to redraw the system to fit the emerging economic and social realities? Well, I would go back to the basics and why do we have copyright law? And I think there are two fundamental justifications. One is the natural rights you created, it's yours, which is an important justification, which is not unrelated to the more utilitarian justification, which is that exclusive rights are an incentive to create, and without them, we might have less creativity. A difficult proposition to prove empirically. But let's say that those are our starting points. One can design an intellectual property system that honors those 2 points without the tremendous amount of detail that copyright laws have accreted over the years. I think that the designing copyright laws to deal with particular economic or social realities generally doesn't work very well because the laws become much too specific. They also are the victims of a great deal of interest group lobbying, which contributes to that overspecificity, and the overspecificity makes those laws difficult to adapt once the premises that underlay a particular bargain between interest groups become overtaken by subsequent events. I believe it is Bernd Hugenholtz who said that the Dutch copyright law was a success for so long, that is the 1914 Dutch copyright law, because it was so non-specific. Unfortunately, it has been superseded by more specific laws, but the basic proposition is that the more open-ended, flexible, and non-technologically specific a copyright law, the more likely it is to be able to adapt to changing economic, social, and technological developments.
Thank you, Jane. Very wise. Laurent, your last 1 minute.
So I am really on the same wave as Jane and Anselm, and I see that, okay, I am not too sure on how we can redesign the IP system, but I think that the IP system needs going back to the roots of it, as pointed out by Jane, and in particular in the balance between private rights and the public interest. This is important for developing countries. This is important for our countries, as we see it very much in the current pandemic. I see that in any case, such balance will need to be reestablished because of the disruptive, massive arrival of artificial intelligence. So the lawmakers will need to find solutions, balances that suit society. We saw it in the current months of crisis. There were large discussions, and even in the questions our fantastic audience raises now, we can see this issue of public rights, public interest versus private rights. So I think there will be a quick need of revisitation. And like my colleague Jane Ginsburg, I would dream short texts, non-specific texts that reaffirm and sometimes create balances that are simple. This over legislation, over detailing results in saying nothing. Coming from an Italian university, from Bocconi University, it is often reminded that the fall of the Roman Empire was in part due to its over details in legislation that created, to a certain extent, short circuits, though there was no electricity and power at that time. So as such, there is we should work on clearer rules and simple rules. If the Paris and Berne Convention are still valid, it's because they were clear and simple and able to be adapted. Okay, artificial intelligence brings issues and problems there. And artificial intelligence is the revolution that marks the current pandemia that we hope will end soon. Though the pandemia may end, but the artificial intelligence era will not. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Laurent. It's 6:11 in Madrid zone time. So it's time for me to close this part of the debate. But before giving the floor finally to Laurent, who will announce the next encounter, I would like to say thanks. First of all, thanks to Alvaro. Could you show up, Alvaro? Say hi.
Yes, hi everyone.
Yeah, good. Thank you. It's fine. Well, Alvaro has been working day and night in the last 2 days in order to be able, in order to manage to get this working properly. And we all are very recognized to you, Alvaro. Thanks for being always on the back side and protecting us. Second, I would like to thank the support team. We have a support team composed by 14 scholars and doctorates and practitioners, young people, who are behind the scenes, who will elaborate in the next days a summary report, and who will run with the keeping your questions and the answers you are giving to your questions already on the chat alive for the next week and so on and for the future. Now, I would like also to thank very warmly our speakers. It was not easy, certainly, in such a very short time to bring on the table so many things. And at the same time, I would like also to thank the support entities. There are quite an amount of support entities, a little more than a dozen, who have supported us to spread out the measures and bring you on board, more than 900 people. And finally, I would like to thank you very much, all of you. I understand your frustration. Probably many of you are very frustrated now. Many very frustrated because you would like to go more. You would like to see your questions being answered. We moved to 1 hour and 10 minutes online now, and this is what we scheduled. What does it mean? Well, it means that this was the place to bring questions. This was the place to start thinking. This is a movement which comes from all over the world. Is a completely global encounter where we will be able to bring together so many views, so many understandings. All of us, the more than 900 people who have been here today, have in common something. We love intellectual property. We are convinced that intellectual property has played a terrific work for the benefit of the society. But we are also convinced that time has arrived not to reshape necessarily, but to rethink. And it is there where you will find us, not only today, but also in the future. So thanks very much for staying with us. And now I would like to give the floor to Laurent, which will close and announce, I guess, the next encounter, which will come in just 3 weeks.
Thank you very much, Manolo. Thank you very much to our splendid moderator. We are preparing a series of encounters, and the next one is planned for the 28th of May. On the 28th of May, we will think together on the relation between IP and investment, IP and trade. And for this, we will consider the West-East relation versus the East-West relation in trade. Okay. As such, we will have a fantastic panel of speakers. Speakers who will come from the WTO. We will have Anthony Taubman, who is the director of the Intellectual Property Division of the World Trade Organization. We will have Professor Claudio Dordi, who is professor at Bocconi University and leads a major US project currently in Vietnam and led in the past European Union project in Vietnam and in Asia. We will have as moderator Professor Javier Seuba. Javier Seuba works for the University of Catalonia and has taught in many universities throughout Europe. We will inform you on the exact template. We will follow the same type of presentation with two speakers, therefore Anthony Taubman and Claudio Dordi, and one moderator, Javier Seuba. And we will also make an announcement that explains how the seminar will develop, around which detailed topics. So this will be the first more detailed seminar, more thematic one, but thematic with a general scope, same thing. Economic development, social development, and an interdependent world. There will be then, later in June, likely the 18th of June, a seminar dedicated to specific issues connected to patents and licensing in this complex period of pandemia, and hopefully a bit by June post-pandemia. And we will continue our cycle probably for a year. We, for the time being, have planned all encounters until December, but we will plan further. And we will be very happy to have you writing us to our addresses, making questions, suggestions, recommendations, so that we expand altogether our common think tank job that TIPSA has the mandate to do, and that the Fide Foundation splendidly promotes throughout the world as well. Thank you very much. Thank you to my distinguished and brilliant colleagues today. This was really an honor to have so many authorities together, and also to have so many authoritative participants listening at us throughout until at this very, very time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. See you on the 28th of May.
Bye now.